Welcome back to Elevate El Paso, guys. Wonderful show lined up for you today. Today we'll be speaking with Sam Williams. Sam is running for 16th Congress seat, right?
16th Congressional.
And tell us about that. How are you?
Well, I ran last time as a write-in to kind of get an education on how to run for office, to be honest with you, because it's not an easy task, and there's a lot of things that people don't realize what you go through. And, you're putting yourself out there. Everything about you, if there's anything in your background or whatever, it's going to come out during an election.
Has your platform changed since the last
No,
round?
I actually stayed. None of the issues have really changed in the last year and a half.
Now, your opponent is very strong in this region. Tell
Yes.
me a little bit about what your strategy is.
Well, one thing is to just show what has she actually done for us here in El Paso. I mean, she ran on an obstructionist type platform last time. She said she was going up there to fight the president, and that's what she did. Well, the guy in the Oval Office, he's only one man. And if he fails, we fail as a country. It doesn't matter. We just need to support whoever's in that office. I worked under 5 presidents in the military. Did I like all of them? No, I didn't. But because they were the ones there, we couldn't let that man fail because he's a leader of the free world, for that matter.
So I remember back 80s, prior to that, the honorable thing for politicians was to be able to work across the aisle.
Right.
Now we have such a huge polarization. It seems like you're either left or right, and it's all a pretty extreme left or a pretty extreme right.
Right. I agree. You see that every day.
And so you started out as an independent. You've now gone Republican. Has your centralist view changed or?
Not really, because I think most of us in America, we fall somewhere in the middle. We may be a little bit left or a little bit right. The majority of people aren't on the far extremes. The extremes get all the coverage because they're the noisiest.
Right.
But that's not how when I talk to people on the street, that's not how they really think.
What are your views on immigration?
Well, we need to do it. You need to do it the right way. My wife is an immigrant. We went through the entire immigration process for her to get to the United States. And this was 32 years ago, so it was a lot more difficult back then. Now with automation and stuff, it's a lot easier to do the paperwork. I was out at the citizenship ceremony yesterday at the Coliseum, and I talked to a guy that did all his own paperwork. He said it took him a month to get everything done. So you can do it right. It's obviously not a very hard process, and I don't think it is. But if you're waiting on a visa or something, I know like my son-in-law right now is stuck in the UK, right? Because he just got out of the Royal Air Force. They applied for his visa months ago, but it's going to take 14 and a half months. It's bogged the system down right now for all the people that are trying to do it the right way. The times have expanded immensely.
So what would you do to change that?
First thing is, if you don't come through a legal port of entry, I don't think that you have a right to start claiming anything. Even asylum needs to be done at a port of entry so it can get processed properly. But when you come through the desert or just fly in somewhere and decide to overstay a visa or whatever, just to stay here, that's these people are getting pushed to the front of the line. Like my opponent, she wants to push these people to the front of the line. What about all the people that have waited for years? We have people that are trying to immigrate from Mexico that wait up to 10 years to get here. How do they feel now when you're just letting people come in from everywhere and saying, okay, you can stay, and we're going to give you 6 months till you have a hearing for your asylum claim? It's ridiculous. And then 80% of those claims never get adjudicated in that person's favor for asylum.
Now, Sam, speaking of a hot topic for our region, and probably nationwide right now, let's talk a little bit about your stance on gun the Second Amendment.
Right. Well, a lot of people have a misconception about the Second Amendment. I'm an avid gun person. I have lots of them, and I enjoy shooting. And we need them for protection. I really do. I think the way the world has gotten, I've been all over the world, and being armed can stop you from being a victim. I honestly believe that. Now, a lot of people aren't trained to react to those kind of situations, but with training and repetition, you can at least understand what to do. It's the same thing we go through in the military. Not every time, the first time you get in a firefight, the chances of you engaging are pretty slim, but at least you're starting to understand what happens, because you can't let that emotion and that fear take over, because you won't do anything. You have to act.
So what about all these red flags laws?
Red flag laws are the first thing to confiscation. Okay, if you look back, you can go back to Nazi Germany, and I hate to bring that up, but what they did is they didn't disarm the pure German. But what they did is they disarmed the Jews and the Gypsies so that they could control that population. This is all about controlling the population. An unarmed population is not going to be able to fight back.
And what's incredible to me is that we are so close to Mexico. I mean, that's a perfect example of, how it doesn't really work.
Right.
You nobody has guns over there but the bad guys.
No, and that's what'll happen. The only people with red flag laws, there's no due process for people. That means they knock on your door, and because your neighbor says, oh, he's a bad guy and he's got guns, just because he doesn't like you or because you're a gun advocate, now he's telling them you're dangerous, and they take your guns. Now there's no due process. You have to go through the process to get your property back.
Yeah.
It's just like you hear buyback programs like O'Rourke's been talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, he's never owned that gun, so how can you buy something back that you never owned?
Yeah.
But back to the red flag laws things, everywhere, you look at Honduras. Honduras has one of the highest murder rates in the world. The population is completely legal. Gun ownership is not there. Venezuela, look at the collapse that happened in Venezuela. In 2012, they got rid of guns. Within less than 10 years, now their country falls apart.
Yeah.
It's because, you hate to say it, but that old line is, an armed populace is a polite populace.
Yeah.
You're not going to challenge somebody that may or may not fight back. But if you have that opportunity, I think it keeps the government in check as well.
And so we have those that say that perhaps we should have guns, but then not assault rifles or...
Definitions are a whole thing. You can't buy an assault rifle. 1934, automatic weapons were banned in the United States for civilian ownership. The reason was because of the St. Valentine's Massacre in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's exactly why they were banned. Now, if you can afford to shoot an automatic weapon, fine, go ahead. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can't control it. Unless that gun is mounted. Being in the military, I've used, automatic weapons. Standing up and shooting a standard M16, you're going to have a little bit of a problem keeping that gun on target.
Now, Sam, different subject now. Part of your platform is advocating for teachers and higher pay raise.
Yeah, I did some analysis. Texas we have all these independent school districts, well over 1,000 of them. And I took El Paso County as an example. We have 9 school districts in this county. If you look at your property tax bill, and I know this isn't a federal issue, but it's still something that the federal government could pressure the states back into doing. 1 county, 1 school district. What happens is right now we have each independent school district lobbying for funds. So each district is getting different funding per student.
Yeah.
It should be the same across the board. The thing is, we spend $1.5 billion a year on education here. All right, teachers are losing out on their retirements when after they're tenured and they retire because they get a windfall tax. It's controlled at the state level. Now, the Miami-Dade district in Florida, the county controls the teachers' retirement. They have 347,000 students, right? They spend $1.2 billion a year on education. Their kids are outperforming our kids right now on SAT and ACT scores. They have a 4-language problem there as opposed to a 2-language problem that we have here. So the language isn't the issue. I think it's because we have all these people vying for money for their own school district. And we only have about 150,000 students here, yet the pay across the board for the teachers in Florida and in Texas, or here in El Paso and Miami-Dade, are roughly the same.
It seems to me like, with the public system being a bit faulty, the performance is not the greatest.
No.
And charter schools are really giving them a run for their money.
Absolutely.
It seems like the solution isn't so much that as much as it is to make schools private. And I mean, teachers in a charter school get paid a lot less.
True. That is true. You have people that are there that really aren't there for a profit. They're there because they want to serve.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that goes right back to government. Government shouldn't be a career. It shouldn't be somewhere you get rich. It should be you want to serve and help your community. And I see that. You see that everywhere in the United States. There's no reason to be in Congress for 30 years. It makes 0 sense. We can pull right into term limits with that. I think 12 years should be it. Regardless, Senate that'd be 2 terms in the Senate. and 6 terms right now in the House. But with the House, there's an issue in the 2-year term. We should change that probably to a 4-year term so we actually get work out of our congressmen.
Well, and I suppose that's part of the problem with the school system where the teachers get tenure, they can't be fired. Now
Right.
they're there. They no longer really care about teaching. So it seems like the solution is not so much to give them more money, but to be able to fire them, to make it some private
That's true.
business.
You need to make it needs somewhat privatized would help. I really think so. Because now you're producing a product, and your product needs to be quality. You want your institution to succeed. Look at your colleges. That's what they do.
So would you advocate for charter schools as opposed to raising it?
That's one I have to really look more into, because on the charter schools, I understand them. I went to private school up through about the 8th grade, and I think I got a better education that way.
I agree.
You get a better foundation. And I think it's our foundations where the problem's at. It's not being done like it used to be. I look at my grandson's homework for math. He's in 2nd grade.
Yeah.
And to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He's got to do all this work for 2 + 2 that doesn't make any sense to us.
Yeah.
What happened to just using the number, learning this stuff instead of just teaching them to count with their hands and their fingers and stuff? We don't need to do that. Go into a McDonald's and give somebody a $20 bill, right? And say your bill is $20.10, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you give them, the dime, or it's $19.10. Let's go that route. And you give them the dime so you can get a dollar bill back. And you confuse them. It doesn't work anymore. And it's very simple stuff. Count backwards.
Yeah. So it seems like if we were to raise the teachers' pay, we would also be raising our taxes.
Yes, we would.
As a Republican, what would you do to guard our taxes?
Well, and that's where that having one school district, one county, because if you look at your tax bill here in El Paso, the biggest part of your tax bill is education. And for the school districts, the school district tax is the highest that we have. That's what's driving our property taxes up. It's not so much the city and the county. So by combining the school districts, you get rid of a lot of the administrative costs that are there. You can't tell me that each one of these superintendents deserves to be paid, $348,000 like El Paso ISD. What do you do for that money? You're not improving the education system. That's what your job is as a superintendent. Yet these guys get these contracts, they get these employment contracts that we as a taxpayer have nothing to say about.
Yeah, and then we have them fighting at Whataburgers.
Right.
So would you consider advocating for charter schools as opposed to raising it?
I think so. I think that would be the way to go. And the other thing is we got to get the federal government out of it.
Exactly.
Because the Department of Education is a relatively new department, but what has it done? No Child Left Behind is probably one of the worst things that we came up with, because you can't just push a kid through, because when he gets out here and has to get a job or go to a tech school or college, he can't perform.
Yeah.
Let the kid be educated. If he can't pass that grade, we need to work with him and get him up to standard before we move him ahead.
Yeah.
I really have a problem with that one.
I appreciate you being here. Thank
No,
you so much.
I appreciate your time.
Not a
That's
problem.
great.